We have made it to the end of season number 1 here in the Portland Trailblazers MyNBA franchise here on NBA 2K24. And today we've got a pretty jam-packed episode today. We're going to be doing a lot of things as we'll be making it all the way up to the NBA draft, which will be in the next episode. So today we're going to quickly recap season number 1. We're going to go over our studs and duds of the year. We are going to go through the playoffs and then start the offseason, which we will do everything leading up to the draft, which includes our NBA draft preview along with the NBA draft lottery. So we'll start with our mini-season recap as the team finished 35-47, which I think was certainly above expectation for what we expected going into year number 1. Despite the fact that we traded away Damian Lillard, the team was arguably better than they were a season ago, and I think that really shows the progress that our young guys in particular are already making at a very young age. Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons led the ship, and then of course the two young guards, Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe, both really improved throughout the season, especially down the stretch. The two of those guys were really good after the All-Star break, which is why they were our two Stud of the Year candidates. For those of you who may have missed the last episode, I like to reward players who play well and punish players who don't play well, because I think most of the sports video games, 2K in specific, don't really do a good job of doing that. We'll start with our Stud of the Year, and as you can see, the vote ended up being very close, within 1% and just a couple of votes, but Shaedon Sharpe is the winner of our Stud of the Year for season number 1. Shaedon Sharpe had a great season. He averaged 15 a game. We really saw the improvements from him on both ends of the floor, and he got better as the year went along, and he did it while remaining efficient the entire way. After the All-Star break in particular is where I really feel like we started to see a star blossom. He averaged over 19 a game after the All-Star break, and he did it on solid efficiency. For most of the season, he struggled in the starting lineup, but was really good off the bench. But after the All-Star break, he was primarily a starter, and he played really well. So because he played so well, his rating will go up by 2. He is now going to be an 82 overall, and his potential will also go up by 2. So him going up in rating will not necessarily affect how much he improves through the offseason. Scoot Henderson ends up getting second place, and for most of the year, I was not planning on putting Scoot on the ballot because I felt like he had met expectations, but as the season went along, he really got better, and I honestly believe he should have won the Rookie of the Year, averaging over 19 points a game along with nearly 5 rebounds and 5 assists, and he did it as the most efficient rookie in this year's class. He had the highest field goal percentage and true shooting percentage amongst qualified rookies. After the All-Star break, he looked like a real superstar, averaging 22 points per game, and we really saw the flashes, not just as a scorer, but also as a playmaker from him. He's got some work to do as a passer with a assist-to-turnover ratio of just a little bit worse than 4-3 after the All-Star break, but I think we saw the improvement there, and then over the last couple of weeks of the year, he looked like a superstar. Even when it was just him, Shaedon Sharpe, and the scrubs playing, we kept winning games because those two were so good, including his 47-point outburst to end the season. So his rating and potential will go up by 1. He is now an 81 overall with morale. So while those two guys are rewarded for playing well, how about the Dud of the Year, which was between Jordan Clarkson and the rookie Chris Murray, and ultimately Chris Murray is the winner, or I guess the loser. He ended up getting more votes, which means he will take the bigger downgrade. There are a few easy excuses for Chris Murray because he is a rookie. He had a severe ankle injury, and he had a hard time of getting into the rotation until after the All-Star break. However, that does not excuse the fact that he was legitimately awful. I don't care that he played 28 games. I don't care that he played around maybe over 10 minutes per game. He was not good. Look at the shooting splits. 27% from the field. That's not going to cut it. His cumulative field goal, 3-point, and 3-throw percentage barely equal 100%. That's not good enough. I did some math and made up my own stat. So I found Chris Murray's win probability added, and I divided it by the amount of minutes he played to find out his wins probability added per minute, and he had the worst wins probability per minute added in the entire NBA. So in other words, he was the least valuable player per minute, or really just the worst player in the NBA. Per 36 minutes, he averaged 7 points per game. True shooting percentage of 37, PER below 4. That is horrific. Even when we gave him more playing time at the end of the year, he sucked. He had 0 points in each of the last 2 games. In his last 4 games, he shot 1 for 19 from 3, and he's supposed to be a 3-point shooter. He was in the G League for probably around 6 or 7 games. He had one really good performance of 27 and 13. His next highest scoring game in the G League, though, was 7 before he had his ankle injury. I get that he's a rookie and all that, but it's not like he's a 19-year-old freak athlete. He's 23 years old. He's younger, a full year younger than LaMelo Ball, who just made an All-NBA team. I feel like the excuses with him are not fair because he is 4 years older than some of these 19-year-old raw players who he was worse than. Jordan Clarkson gets second place, and in a vacuum, he wasn't bad per se, but I expected similar numbers that he had last year in Utah, and we didn't really get that. He was our 5th leading scorer, and it's not like Jordan Clarkson really provides many other services as a high level. With him being a microwave scorer, primarily used as the 6th man, I had hoped that we would have had more big games out of him, but that just did not happen. Especially in the games that I played, he just was not very good. So his rating and potential will go down by 1. It's not as big of a deal for him because he's a veteran player at this point. He already kind of has his role figured out, but still, I guess, unfortunate for him as he was below expectations. So now let's simulate through the playoffs. Let's take a look at the final results here of season number 1 and see who is going to be our first NBA champion. That'll start with the play-in tournament as we take a look at what happens there. I think the most interesting storyline has to be the Denver Nuggets, the defending NBA champs, who only are the 8th seed. Do they make it out of the play-in? They do not. They lose to OKC, and then they lose to Dallas for the 8th seed. So the Nuggets are out. As for the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks barely squeak through, and then the Bulls beat Detroit in order to get the number 8 seed. So this is what our playoff bracket looks like. We're going to simulate round by round and see what happens. In the first round, we had a lot of pandemonium. In particular, the number 1 seeded Los Angeles Clippers losing in 7 to the Mavericks. Kawhi Leonard had 17 points on poor shooting. Paul George had 10 points. The playoff P narrative is never going to go away, is it? While Luka Doncic completely took over the game with 46 points. The legacy of failure for the Clippers continues. There were other higher-seeded teams who lost, including the Warriors. The Cavs lose to the Knicks again, and then the 2-seeded Sixers losing 5 to Milwaukee. As we look at the conference finals in the West, it'll be the Grizzlies and the Lakers, the 2 higher-seeded teams. Then out East, the Heat and the Celtics with another exciting battle going to 7 games. But Damian Lillard, the most valuable player, leads them to a 40-point Game 7 win. And then the Knicks beat Milwaukee in the second round. So as we go to the finals, Ja Morant and Julius Randle win the conference finals MVPs. But it's not the Grizzlies and the Knicks. It's the Lakers and the Knicks. I don't know how Ja won the MVP even when they lost. But all right. Los Angeles and New York, the 2 biggest markets in the finals. The Lakers are the favorite as LeBron James looks for ring number 5. Him and Anthony Davis are looking to get their second championship with the Lakers. And then the New York Knicks, who barely snuck into a playoff spot as the number 6 seed, make it here. Both teams trade off the first 2 games, then they trade off the next 2 games. 5 goes to the Lakers, 6 goes to the Knicks. Both teams are just alternating wins. And so that'll bring us into Game 7. Does LeBron get ring number 5, or can the New York Knicks shock the world? Looks like a really close game here with just a couple of minutes to go. The Knicks tie it. I think we're going to hop in and watch. Why not? It's Game 7 of the NBA Finals with a little over a minute left, and the game is tied. LeBron James is called for a charging on Julius Randle. What a big foul call against LeBron. Following possession, Brunson is fouled by Anthony Davis. That is his 6th. He's out of the game. Brunson at the line would make his first one, and he would miss the second, going 1 for 2. The Lakers back with it. It's Austin Reeves with it, with around a minute left. He gets it to LeBron for 3, and it is off. Big miss for LeBron James, and the Knicks get it back up by 1. Mitchell Robinson with it inside. Robinson's pass is stolen away by Christian Wood. In transition, D'Angelo Russell's pass is intercepted by Julius Randle. On the other end, Brunson for three, no good. This has been some ugly basketball since we've hopped into the game. LeBron gets it over to D'Angelo Russell. Russell guarded by Randle, and it's stolen! Another turnover from D'Angelo Russell, and that'll bring Julius Randle to the line. He makes both, and the Knicks are ahead by 3 as the Lakers call a timeout, shot clock unplugged. LeBron with it, turnaround inside is good, and we are within 1. So the Lakers go for the quick 2, and that means that they're going to have to foul the Knicks again. New York having trouble inbounding it as it goes to Jalen Brunson, who will go to the line to shoot 2. 14 seconds left on the clock as he makes the first one, and the Knicks are ahead by 2. Second one here for Jalen Brunson is up, and it is good. And so the Knicks are ahead by 3. Lakers are out of timeouts. They've got to do something quick. Austin Reeves for the tie. Bang! Are you kidding me? Of all people, it's Austin Reeves who ties it with a 3 here in Game 7 of the Finals. The Knicks are going to have an opportunity off the timeout to inbound and win it. Brunson guarded by D'Lo. Brunson, floater for the championship. It's good! The Knicks take the lead with 1.3 seconds. LeBron from full court. It nearly is good, but it rattles out. The New York Knicks have won the Finals here in season number 1 of the Portland Trail Blazers franchise. Who would have thunk it? A team led by Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle just won an NBA championship. Imagine saying that 5 years ago. Someone would look at you like you're crazy. But nonetheless, they have done it, and the New York Knicks have won their first NBA title in over a half a century. The NBA Finals MVP will not be Jalen Brunson, who hit the game winner. It's Julius Randle. That might be the funniest possible outcome for the season in real life. Julius Randle winning the Finals MVP. Have we had a weirder Finals MVP? Other than Andre Iguodala, every guy here is like a first ballot Hall of Famer for the most part, going back to like 1980 when Cedric Maxwell won it with the Celtics. So now that'll bring us to the offseason. Again, we're going to do everything leading into the NBA draft today, and that will start off with the retirements phase of the offseason. Now, I have a little bit of confessing to do. LeBron James initially retired, but there's no way LeBron James is going to go out by losing in Game 7 of the Finals, so I overrid his retirement. There's no way LeBron would retire like that. Greg Popovich hangs up the clipboard, so he is done. And there were a number of notable players who I did not mention in the player retirements phase, such as Andre Iguodala, who we just mentioned. Blake Griffin as well gets his jersey retired by the Clippers. That'll bring us into the league meetings stage, and I always like adding a new rule every offseason. So what we are going to add here is a player fouled in transition with a clear path will get 2 free throws and possession of the ball. I think the NBA has talked about adding this as a rule. I hope they do. I think that would be really good. Normally, during the first offseason of my series, I allow for the one-and-done rule to be abolished. I think last year in the Knicks franchise, it might have been like season 2 or 3. There was a lot of hype a couple years ago that the one-and-done rule has been taken out, but I really haven't heard anything about that recently. So I'll probably add that in the series at some point, but not for this next draft. Alrighty, boys, it's time. We've made it to the NBA draft lottery. This year, we only have our own first-round pick. Keep in mind, next year we have 3 picks, a swap worst between the Rockets and the Nets, who are the 2 worst teams this year. We also have Minnesota's unprotected next year, and obviously our own. So we're going to have 3 next year, which is exciting, but only 1 this year. Our only hope is our own pick, which is projected 10th. It says Heat projected pick here via Portland, but it's a swap best, and we were worst, so we get the better pick. For most of the year, there has not been a consensus number 1 pick in this draft, but that has changed over the last couple of months. Canadian forward Jaden Hudson, who's been playing with the NBA G League, has had a great year. He has made himself the top guy in this draft, and so it is the Jaden Hudson lottery. The Nuggets get the 14th pick. Imagine if they moved up. The Pistons will get the 13th pick. The 12th pick will go to the Oklahoma City Thunder. All right, this could be us right around here. The 11th pick will end up going to the San Antonio Spurs, so we will not pick any worse than originally projected. All right, the moment of truth. The 10th pick will go to the Portland Trail Blazers. So unfortunately, we will not move up in the lottery. We will stay put, and we will enter the offseason with the 10th pick in the draft. Still no changes so far. Orlando at 7. Everything's holding to form. The 6th pick will go to the Washington Wizards, so the Kings and the Spurs leapfrog into the top 4. The 5th pick will go to OKC via the Rockets. That pick had the best odds of going number 1. The 4th pick goes to the San Antonio Spurs. They will not get the number 1 pick 2 years in a row. Thank God. The 3rd pick will be made by the Sacramento Kings. So now it is down to the Rockets and the Hornets. The 2nd pick in the draft goes to the Houston Rockets, which means the Charlotte Hornets have won the 2024 NBA Draft Lottery. They get the number 1 pick, and they will get the right to most likely select Canadian forward Jaden Hudson, who could join a really nice young core led by LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. And I think his fit on that roster is honestly really good, and we'll talk about a little bit more why in just a little bit. Our Portland Trailblazers do not move up or move down. We will have the 10th pick in the draft along with the 3rd pick in the 2nd round from the Hornets. If we would like to potentially move up, we've got the ammunition to do it. 3 first-round picks next year, 2 more in 2028, along with plenty of second-round picks, and pretty much our entire roster is under contract. We're going to have our draft preview in just a moment, but first, we have some open spots on the staff. I think Chauncey Billups, the head coach, or should I say Chauncey Billups, did a great job with our young guys, so we're not going to touch Mr. Big Shot. If anything, he might be extended soon, but we ended up making a few smaller moves with our staff. So that brings us to the NBA Draft Combine and pre-draft workouts, and I think this is the perfect time for us to have our draft preview. We've already talked about some of these players earlier, but I'm going to go in more depth today, and some of the guys we're going to talk about today we have not mentioned at all throughout the pre-draft season, so it'll be nice to get ourselves introduced to some of these players for the very first time. So as I mentioned just a moment ago, Jaden Hudson is the clear number 1 pick. All the mock drafts have him going to Charlotte, but then after that, all hell kind of breaks loose. So why exactly has Jaden Hudson become the clear and consensus number 1 pick? Because 2 months ago, it was a 3 or 4-way race. I think there's a lot of reasons why Hudson is the consensus best prospect in this draft. The big combo forward is the perfect modern NBA wing, and I think he is the exact fit for the Charlotte Hornets. I think he complements Brandon Miller really well, and he's a perfect off-ball piece to pair with LaMelo Ball. Hudson is a big 6'9" forward who has played for the NBA G League Ignite this year. Before that, he had been playing in his native Canada. Hudson has really improved as a shooter this year, especially off the catch. Defensively, he is great. His size and length really lets him not just be a nuisance on the perimeter, but bang down low with the big guys. He's a really good athlete as well, and I think that really gives him a lot of upside. The one area of his game that is not good is his playmaking. He really does not have a feel as a playmaker, and as of now, he probably will not be much of a secondary playmaker early on with the Charlotte Hornets. Behind him, there are a number of guys who I think could be the 2nd overall pick. I think Jaden Prospero, the point guard out of Texas, is definitely the 2nd best prospect in this draft, but I don't know if he's a great fit for the Rockets, who already have multiple good on-ball players. Prospero is the best playmaker in this draft. He is an unbelievable passer, but the rest of his game could use some work. I like his scoring inside the arc. He can drive to the basket. He is an improving shooter in the mid-range, but he can't really shoot the 3, and defensively, he's not great at all. Prospero missed the first half of the year with an injury, but he has come back healthy and strong for Texas in Big 12 play. I think Omarion Knight and Thaddeus Fontaine would both be really good fits for the Rockets, even if they are slightly worse value than Jaden Prospero. We'll start with Knight from Florida State, who's a big 6'11" forward. I think his mobility at his size is really impressive. He's a good defensive player. And then on the offensive end of the floor, he's really improving as a scorer. And I think his playmaking at his size isn't horrible. He's not the most efficient player for his size, which is not ideal. I would like to see him get a little bit stronger and use his strength as an inside scorer. But I think as a 3-way scorer, there is some real upside there, and we have seen the flashes from him as a shot creator. So offensively, he's a project, but the upside is there because he is a freakish athlete. The explosiveness that he has at his size is otherworldly. And then we look at Thaddeus Fontaine, who I think as a prospect has a pretty similar archetype. 6'10", 240-pound big forward. He knows how to use his strength, especially defensively. He is a problem inside. I think he's a little bit more polished than Omarion Knight. He's more efficient as a scorer. I think he's a little bit better defensively. I think he's definitely better as a post defender, one of the best shot blockers and rim protectors in this draft. But I don't think he has the ceiling that Omarion Knight does because he just does not have the explosiveness that he has. So if the Rockets are looking for more of the sure thing, and they've already got plenty of high upside players already, I think Fontaine might be the best way to go. But if not, Omarion Knight, I think also makes a lot of sense for them. Now, the Rockets are only going with one of the three players I just mentioned in one of the three mock drafts. In one of the mock drafts, the Rockets are going with Marco Romano, the Italian point guard. In the first prospect profile we did, I said there's a lot of similarities to Cesar DiCarlo, the Italian point guard we had in the Knicks series. I don't think Romano is quite as good of a passer, but he is still a very gifted playmaker, easily the strength of his game. I think he is a little bit better as a scorer and as a shot creator, though, than Cesar DiCarlo. So I think in that sense, he's not one-dimensional offensively. On defense, he's got some work to do, but he's a good rebounder and somebody who's going to fill up the stat sheet. Kind of a similar player to a guy like Josh Giddey or maybe Lonzo Ball, but without the elite defense. Cassius Maxey is projected to go all over the place in mock drafts. One of them has him going number 2. One of them has him going 10th to the Blazers. So basically, there's a wide range of outcomes for his draft stock. I think he'd be a good fit in Houston at number 2. I also think he'd be a really good fit for Portland at number 10. He's a very smooth offensive player. At 6'9", he moves like a guard. The shot creating upside is absolutely there. He's an explosive athlete, as you can see there, dunking on the Duke forward Darius Springer, who we're going to talk about in just a moment. I think Maxey's efficiency certainly could use some work, and his consistency really was his one issue at UCLA. But he's got a really good feel for the game as a playmaker, and I like what he brings defensively. As long as he can improve his consistency, I think he's got a really good shot to be an all-star one day, and I think there's a good shot he could out-project his 15th ranking, as you can see here according to Sporting Network. Some other guys to look out for in the lottery and players who could be targets for the Blazers include Cale Foster, the guard out of Texas. I think he's a really good wing player, probably more of a 2-guard or even a small forward rather than a point guard. I think he can play on the ball, and he did a decent job of that when Jaden Prospero was hurt, but he's at his best off the ball as a complementary and secondary playmaker. He's a really solid shooter, and he's a really good defensive player. I think he's going to be very good right off the bat, and I think his playmaking gives him some intriguing long-term upside. I think he's not your ordinary 3-and-D guy because of his ability to create his shot, particularly beyond the arc. He's also a really good athlete, and I think he very well could be a top 5 pick, and if not, he could be a candidate for the Blazers. Marvin Kamara out of USC has had his stock go way up throughout the season. Now, I'm not convinced he will be a top 10 pick, which is what some media outlets have him ranked as, but I think probably as a mid-first, maybe late lottery guy, I think he could be a really good player at the next level. He's sort of an undersized big, and I think he's got the ability to play down low as a big. I think he can score with his back to the basket, and I think he's a solid enough rim protector. But I think he's also got the athleticism and versatility to have long-term upside as somebody who can switch onto the perimeter and eventually become a good shooter. He's got some work to do there. Darius Springer out of Duke is a really intriguing forward. The first thing you're going to notice when you watch him is that smooth lefty stroke. The second thing you're going to notice is his physicality. For somebody who's 19 years old, he's really strong already, and he's really tough down low, and he can bully guys to score inside and make plays defensively. Going into the season, he was a projected top 5 pick, and through the first half of the season, it looked like he would go in the top 5, maybe a candidate to go number 1, but over the last month or so, he has hit a wall in his play, and his stock has gone down. I like his ability as an inside scorer, though. He's a versatile defender. He can guard wings and bigs. I think he's going to be more of a power forward long-term because of his strength. He's not the most explosive player, and he does have a little bit of a hard time switching onto quicker wings. His shooting efficiency needs a lot of work, But I think he's got a lot of upside as somebody who can be a three-way scorer and a pretty good playmaker at his size. I think Caden Ko, the wing out of UConn, is another guy who could be a good fit for the Blazers at number 10. 6'6", 6'9" wingspan. I really like Ko's all-around game. This is somebody who can score inside, an explosive above-the-rim athlete who can drive inside and score in contact. He's a good defensive player, and he's a really good playmaker as well for his size, a very solid passer. He's not a great shooter, especially from three. His efficiency really was not good this year. He's not a particularly great shot creator, nor is he great off the catch. You got to have a three ball if you're going to be a good wing in today's league, but I think the rest of this game is pretty solid all around as long as he can be a more consistent shooter and a little bit more consistent on the defensive end of the floor. I think you could be looking at a really good player, but I think he is a good fit for the Trailblazers roster. Let's look at some guys now who could go in the lottery, but I don't think would be as good of fits for the Blazers. And the first guy we're going to mention is Elias Sharp, the guard out of Illinois. His stock has skyrocketed throughout the season. Wasn't really on draft radars going into the year, but he has played very well this season. This is a high IQ guard who has shown the ability to run an offense, and I think he probably will be a top 10 pick when it's all said and done, despite the fact that going into the year, he was a complete afterthought to a lot of scouts. This is somebody who's a really solid outside shooter, and his efficiency and his volume has gone up as the year has gone along. He's got a really solid natural feel as a playmaker, and he can drive inside to the basket, and he's an all-around efficient scorer for a 6'4" guard. Defensively, he could use some work, but he's not horrible in that area, and his athleticism is really good. I think this is a top 5 to 10 player in this draft. Even though Scoot Henderson's skill set is kind of redundant with him, if he falls to 10, the Blazers might have to consider it. Tyson Ledbetter out of South Carolina is kind of in the same boat. He's a smaller guard whose skill set is pretty redundant with Scoot Henderson, but I think he's a really, really talented player. I think he's a little bit more of an all-around scorer as opposed to Elias Sharp, and I think his athleticism is right there too. I don't think he's quite the playmaker that Sharp is, and he certainly doesn't have the size or length that Sharp has. So I think Ledbetter goes a little bit later, but I definitely do see him as a lottery guy, probably somewhere between 7 and 14. Florian Mack is the next player we're going to look at, a big Australian forward. His presence defensively is really impressive. He's an improving scorer, but he's raw in that area. I think he's more of a project who you're hoping that you can bank on his athleticism and look to develop down the line. Let's look at the Florida Atlantic duo next with Tyron Howard and Federico Simone Mandrinen. We'll start with Tyron Howard, who I think is going to be a really good role player at the next level. This isn't somebody who's going to completely turn around an organization, but this is somebody who's going to be in the league 15 years and making impacts for playoff teams because this kid is a really, really tough defensive player. He's a great playmaker as well. He's not a particularly great scorer. I think that will come along. And if it does, I think he'll be the perfect role-playing guard for the modern NBA. Federico Simone Mandrinen, his teammate, I think is also going to be a good role player. This is somebody who can shoot the hell out of the ball. He knows how to get off screens and navigate through defensive players to get good looks from three. I think he's more than just a sharpshooter, though. I think he's an impressive athlete, especially for being one of the younger players in the draft. He's not a good inside scorer, though. He gets pretty much all of his scoring exclusively from outside 15 feet, particularly from beyond the arc. I think he's a solid playmaker and solid defensive player. If he can provide more inside offensively and becomes less of a one-dimensional scorer, then I think he could be a really, really good player down the line. Some other names to watch out for, possibly out of lottery range, more so in the middle of the first round, include Cameron Banks, the 6'5" guard out of Duke. I really like his explosiveness at his size. That's the first thing you're going to notice when you watch him. I think he's a solid playmaker and an improving shooter as well, but he needs some more work as a scorer, particularly just overall consistency. I think the A three-point grade here is a little bit generous. Solid playmaker, but defensively he's a liability. Now, I do think he has the size and length to eventually be a good defender, but now he's just not good on that side of the ball. He's more of an offensive player for the time being. Tanner Calhoun, the wing from Kansas, is one of the more polarizing wild cards in this draft. Now, on the floor, you know what you're getting. One of the best shooters off the catch in this draft. He doesn't necessarily have the athleticism to be a great player, but he's going to be a solid shooter. Kind of a similar prospect to Grady Dick coming out of Kansas last year. A guy who's a really good sharpshooter. Defensively, needs some work. Playmaking, needs some work, but he can shoot the ball. The C+ three-point grade is not accurate here. He can sling it. Now, there are some character concerns with this young man. Reportedly, he does not have a great relationship with a lot of teammates, and that could possibly cause his stock to fall. As we looked here towards the end of the first round, I think Amadou Mwangi is one of the most intriguing players in the entire draft. The big out of UConn has unbelievable explosiveness for his size. He's one of the quickest players in the entire draft, regardless of position, and he's a 7-footer, which is unbelievable. He can handle the ball, which is ridiculous. Look at this play. Finds the mismatch, and he takes him right to the hole. I think this gives him a lot of upside, being somebody who grew up playing guard, has the quickness of the guard, and had a big growth spurt late in high school. It's not like he's small either. He's 250 pounds, and he's a monster down low. Now, he still is learning how to play the center position. He's got some work to do offensively, but the upside is definitely there for the late first round. I think Cheikh Doucouré is another intriguing athlete. This is somebody who's got all-star upside, but he's got a long ways to go. He's only been playing basketball for a few years, and it's easy to tell, but it's also easy to tell the upside. He's got great size and length, which helps him defensively. This is somebody who is explosive. He can make plays inside, but he just needs to be more consistent at just about everything. He's not a particularly great shooter. He's not a great defender, although he's got the length to do it. He just lacks the intangibles. I will say, though, he doesn't really have a clear weakness to his game, which I think is a big deal. It's not like there's one area that he's really bad at, and I think his athleticism could eventually carry him into becoming a late bloomer and thus a really good player down the line. Another intriguing name to watch out here for at the end of the first round, another international player, is Austrian forward Fritz Bengaro. 6'10", only 190 pounds. I think this is somebody who could be a good stretch big at the next level. He's already got a good three-point jump shot for his age. Now, defensively, he's got some work to do, and I do think he has a good feel as a playmaker, so offensively, I think he checks most of the boxes. He can score, he can shoot, and his playmaking isn't bad, but you want his defense to improve, and before that, I'm not sure if he's quite an NBA-level rotation player until his defense improves. Bryce Watson out of Dayton is a guy who went into the year as a projected top 10 pick. His stock has fallen a lot, and he is now projected to go here at the end of the first round. When we talked about him earlier in the season, I said consistency was the issue. I will say his consistency got better throughout the year. It's just that he was consistently not very good. A very inefficient player, barely shot over 40% from the field in conference play. I mean, that's just flat out not good. I do think he's got a smooth jump shot, and he's a really intriguing playmaker for a 6'7" wing, but he's not a great defensive player. He's not an elite athlete. And I think it's just possible that scouts might have overrated him coming into the season as a top 15 recruit in last year's high school class, and he might just not be that. As we look at the guys going into the second round, Apollo Cone, the big man, is another guy who going into the season was a projected top 10 pick, and the problem is he just has not been very good. He hails from France, and he played this year at the University of Kentucky, and he also just was not very good. There's a long ways to go in his development, but I think the upside is absolutely there. He has shown the ability to shoot the ball and space the floor. He has the size and length to be a really good rim protector, and he has shown the flashes of doing that. He's also shown the flashes of being a playmaker. So he's got all of these skills, but he hasn't really been able to put it together. And along with that, I don't think he's a very good athlete at all. I get that he's 7'3", but it just feels like he's really uncoordinated at his size, and that's definitely an issue, but he's got intriguing skills that make him worth a flyer in the early second round. Jace McCain out of Penn State is an intriguing player who I do think could end in the first round when it's all said and done. He's got a very unusual build, 6'8", 240 pounds. He's built similarly to David Roddy, who was a first-rounder a few years ago, and I think both of them are pretty similar as prospects. I think McClain really uses his size well, and I think his toughness and strength is going to come a long way. Darren Graham from UConn is a guy we talked about earlier in the year. He's a big guard. He's like 6'8", and he's got really good court vision, and he's got a really intriguing ability as a playmaker. Now, the rest of this game is quite raw, and I do think he's got some work to do, but he's one of the best playmakers in the entire draft. He's not a bad defensive player, and he's a solid scorer inside, but he's got to work on his shooting, and he doesn't necessarily have elite athleticism or anything, but I think his passing and his basketball IQ at his age is really intriguing. Fabian Huger from Germany. This is a guy we talked about earlier in the season as well. He's a really intriguing athlete at 6'6". I think he could be a solid combo guard. This is somebody who's a good defensive player, and the explosiveness at his size is really impressive. I think this is somebody who probably is going to line up best as a 2 guard, but he can also play the 1 and the 3. And I think his size and versatility is going to make him worth an early second-round pick. He can pass the ball, he can score the ball, and he's an extremely dynamic athlete as well. The next player we're going to talk about is Enzo Shabazz. He missed the entire season with a knee injury. He was supposed to play internationally in Portugal, but he couldn't because he was hurt. Despite that, though, I think he's gotten a really intriguing skill set. 6'9", he's a tough physical player. He's a monster to defend inside. He's got so many moves in the post, and he's an all-around really good defensive player. He's great on the wing. He's improving down low, and I think he could be a good interior defender down the line. As we look down the board even farther, I think Zayshawn Small, the center out of Georgia, is being really undervalued in this class. He's a solid all-around player who's improving offensively. The jump shot, he's working on it. He's a really good post defender, though. I think his rim protection is some of the best in this draft, and he's going to be able to make an impact early on defensively. And with the offensive upside, he could be really good. Damalio de los Santos is another guy who I think could be intriguing. Here, projected to go in the 50s. He's a 7-foot, 250-pound big who's got the size to dominate you down low. His physicality is really impressive. He's been playing internationally for FC Barcelona, which is one of the best clubs out in Europe. Since he's on one of the best teams, he hasn't had a super big role there, but he's sort of been their enforcer, if you will. And for a 19-year-old to be the team's certified tough guy is really impressive. He's got some skill as well. The outside shot is not horrible, and I think his tough style of play along with his shooting is going to make him a really good role player. He has no business going in the 50s. Joshua Villarreal will be the final player we go over, the talented wing out of UTSA. He's a really solid all-around scorer who's got a great three-point shot. He's not a bad playmaker either. He's not horrible defensively, and I like his overall versatility, but he's definitely got some work to do in that area. But if nothing else, the guy really can shoot the 3-ball, and if you can get that in the 50s, then it is absolutely going to be worth it, even if the ceiling isn't, like, ridiculously high. I think there is some intriguing players even projected to go as undrafted guys, and the Blazers certainly will be monitoring the undrafted and two-way market as we go into the offseason. Us, along with every other team, is going to have an opportunity to get these guys some playing time in the Summer League, and I'm curious to see which back-end players here are going to potentially prove themselves as role players and which top-end guys prove to be worth their draft stock. Let's take a look at the NBA Draft Combine, see who performed well, see who didn't. It's not like the NFL Combine where pretty much everybody participates. Normally, a lot of the top prospects don't do the Combine, but there were a number of top guys who did do it here. Some notable performers include Cameron Banks, the guard from Duke. He's an extremely explosive athlete, and he unsurprisingly showed it here. Damalio de los Santos led in bench press reps. That's not a surprise. Shek Doucouré had a pretty solid combine. He shot the ball surprisingly well, which I think is certainly encouraging. Cale Foster put an all-around good show on. I think he's got a real shot to be a top 5 pick. We could have 2 Texas Longhorns going inside the top 5. Marvin Kamara, the USC forward, was pretty solid. 40-inch vertical, shot the ball really well. Caden Ko, the wing from UConn, was a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to see the numbers a little bit higher athletically and shooting-wise, but I still think he will be a lottery pick. Apollo Cone really is not a very explosive athlete. He showed it here. He did fine in the on-court testing, but athletically, he's not great. And we knew that going into the combine, so I don't think his stock goes down too much, but he had probably the slowest sprint time and one of the lowest verticals. Tyson Ledbetter out of South Carolina was pretty solid. I thought he would have ran a little bit faster, but he certainly didn't run bad times at all. Cassius Maxey out of UCLA performed really well. I think he very well could have enticed the Rockets enough to pick him at number 2, and if not the Rockets, somebody else very early in this draft. I think there's a real shot that Maxey goes in the top 5. Elias Sharp performed phenomenally out of Illinois. His stock continues to go up. Darius Springer was solid. I would have liked to have seen him shoot the ball a little bit better, but I do think his athletic testing was really good for what we expected from him. And that's about it. As we look at the statistical leaders for the Combine, the thing that really stands out immediately is Amadou Mwangi had one of the fastest sprint times. We talked about his guard-like explosiveness, and he proved that here at the Combine. As for the other athletic testings, there wasn't really anything overly surprising, I would say. Wade Watson, 333 pounds, led the way in bench press reps. He's a very intriguing forward because, well, he's so big. Some guys who shot the ball well include Luis Mata Jr. He shot unbelievably well, especially from 3. Elias Sharp, as I mentioned, he performed really well. No major surprise. Joshua Villarreal, the UTSA forward, was also really good in the shooting drills, which also is not a surprise. Now let's partake in our pre-draft workouts. We're going to get guys in our facility. We're going to look at all the top prospects, including Jaden Hudson. I don't want to rule anything out. I want to keep all options open. We have the ammunition to trade up if we want. And then I looked at some guys who could go in the second round as well, like Bryce Watson, Zayshawn Small, Shek Doucouré. I want to look at players we could consider with our second round pick as well. As we take a look at the results, there were a few guys who really impressed me. Omarion Knight, in particular, stood out more than anybody else. His explosiveness was really put on display, and if he shows up to the Rockets workout like this, I don't know how they're going to keep him out of the building. I think he's going to be the second overall pick if he continues to look like this. Some other players who impressed me included Shek Doucouré, the German forward. I thought he, all around, had really good numbers, just as he did at the Combine. I thought Cale Foster put on a show. Of all the guards and wings there, including guys like Darius Springer, Cassius Maxey, and even Jaden Prospero, I thought Cale Foster, to be honest, might have been the best one. Jaden Hudson, who did not participate in the Combine, unsurprisingly looked good here. I think he's going to crush the Charlotte workout. There were some guys who were disappointing, though. Jaden Prospero, in particular, was really unimpressive. He didn't run an overly good time. I thought he would jump a little bit higher, and his shooting numbers were really bad. I expected a little bit more from Cassius Maxey and Darius Springer, but both of those guys did participate in the Combine, and they both looked pretty good. So I'm not as concerned about them as I am with Jaden Prospero, because he was not at the Combine, and his testing was honestly quite bad. Let's look at the mock drafts before we wrap up. The Sporting News has Cassius Maxey going number 2. As for us at number 10, they have us going with Tanner Calhoun. I'd be a little bit surprised if we pick him over somebody who's got a really high ceiling like a Omarion Knight, but we did invite Calhoun to our pre-draft workout. I think he could be a really good fit for our roster. And then they have us getting Kadeem Jackson Jr., the talented 3-and-D 24-year-old wing out of UNC. 2K is the Rockets going with Marco Romano with the second overall pick. And this is the mock draft that has us going with Cassius Maxey at number 10. I'd be really surprised if he falls to 10, especially after a really good showing at the Combine. But if he does, that might be kind of hard to pass up. They have us going with Jace McClain, the forward from Penn State. We talked about him. I think that could be a really solid pick in the early second round if he does not go in the first round. NBA.com has Omarion Knight going number 2. I personally think this is what will happen. But again, there are like 6 guys the Rockets are going to consider here. And then they've got the Blazers going with Darius Springer. I think that pick as well makes a lot of sense. I'd be a little bit surprised if he falls to 10 as well, like Cassius Maxey. But if he does, I think that'd be a really good pick. And I suppose there is a chance that one of Maxey or Springer does fall to 10. And if they do, that's probably the favorite for what Portland does. And then in the second round, they've got us picking Darius Holman Jr., the guard from Illinois, the backcourt mate to Elias Sharp, who's obviously going to be a very high pick in the first round. So that'll wrap up today's episode. Next time around will be the 2024 NBA Draft. It should be a lot of fun. It'll be premiering on the channel sometime during the middle of next week, probably Tuesday or Wednesday. I hope everybody enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.